What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. If you're new to the channel, my name's Mac. This is my YouTube channel, How to Heal. I go over some stuff that I've learned and that I found has been very helpful for my own healing, my own mindset, and finding peace. So we'll start off with a nice stretch. Lots of cracks. Alrighty. First of all, I hope you guys are all having a great day. Today's video, I wanted to discuss a principle that I learned in a book by Don Miguel Ruiz, The Four Agreements. So, in this book, the main theme is basically that we have a lot of agreements that we innately learn through life, especially when we're young, that we don't really have a chance to check out or really agree to, but we just kind of succumb to them in our own learning. And then we have a thing called, that he refers to as the big judge, which is essentially like the ego, always ripping you down, telling you need to be more, telling you you're not good enough, all these things, really facilitating and living off a lot of these agreements that we've just kind of been raised with. And then there's also the third part, which is the victim, which is essentially ourselves when we live in line with the big judge and these agreements, or the big book of law, as he also refers to it as. So these three things, later on in the book, he refers to as a parasite that we essentially harbor in our own body, and this parasite will take our own energy as a means to keep itself alive. So really you can kind of look at this like the ego trying to feed itself with either kind of your own pain or issues or energy that you're putting into it to big up itself, to make your ego inflated, to make you feel better about your sense of self. So obviously this can be a big issue, this parasite, and he talks about three main ways essentially to get rid of the parasite, because it drains a lot of our energy, it causes us a lot of emotional pain, and to do a lot of things unconsciously towards others that aren't necessarily very helpful or good for anyone involved. So the first way that he discusses is essentially to kill the parasite. So if he imagines, well, he describes it as a parasite with 1,000 heads, and each of those heads, or more, each of those heads represents a fear of yours that has been instilled with you through the big book of law, or the agreements, right? And that might be through your childhood learning. You may have learned that I feel I can't do these things, right? Like maybe you fell off a bike when you're really young and it's like, I can't ride a bike, right? But that's not the truth. That's just a belief system. That's just a really strong belief you may have. And his approach towards killing the parasite in this context is, imagine all of these little parasitic heads, and you have to kind of cut them off one by one. And you do that by essentially facing your fears little by little. You can't really take them all out at once, because that's just far too big of a task, I think, for any of us to really take on that quickly and abruptly. But start small, right? So with an example of like the bike, maybe you start by standing over the bike or sitting on the seat, right? And okay, you've cut off one head there. You've cut off the innate fear of anything associated with a bike, right? And now you're one step further to eliminating that parasite. It's a long task and it can be tiring, but as you do this, there's less parasites taking your energy, so you're going to have more energy to continue this journey and continue this goal of ridding yourself of this negative energy. And after sitting on the seat, maybe you come back a day later and you're like, oh yeah, I can totally sit on the seat again. I proved to myself that that belief wasn't true, and I was able to sit on the seat and I was completely fine. So maybe now you play with your balance a bit, you lift one foot up onto the pedal, right? Or maybe you start to kind of walk the bike, right? Your feet aren't on the pedals, but you're rolling around, you're moving on the bike now. And you're starting to realize like, oh, I can kind of move on this, and there's another head knocked off. And you can continue this until you can take down some of the bigger beliefs and do some of the harder tasks, which in this case might be riding a bike fully, right? And I think it's about consistency too, because there may be days where the task just seems too difficult or things are just not aligning or going your way, and it might seem like it won, but ultimately you have the opportunities and the chances to come back and work on this repeatedly. It's going to be a bit of a longer task. So the second thing is to starve it. So with starving it, he essentially says, like, don't give it your energy, right? Earlier I said this parasite lives off of negative energy, right? So if your ego is trying to bring you down and it successfully does it, and it creates these negative emotions or these painful things, or the big judge in this context, then you're going to be creating this negative energy and feeding it, and it's going to essentially be like, yeah, it's working, I have more power, and it's going to keep rolling, right? And that's why it's really good to try and keep our ego in check. So in the sense of starving it, he essentially says to try to control your emotions. This is where, like, being really conscious and aware plays a big role, because if you can control your emotions and not get taken down this pattern or path of, yeah, I can't do this, I can't do anything, I suck, I'm never going to be this, I'm never going to be that, I just can't do stuff. If you don't feed it that negative energy, it's going to weaken it, right? Because the pattern that it runs on will start to break away and fall apart. So that's a really powerful option as well. And then the third one was what he referred to as the initiation of death. So I don't know if there's other aspects to this as well, because I think there's many ways to recognize. Sorry, my mustache is incredibly itchy today. I think there's a lot of ways or means to an end for recognizing the reality of death, but he says this is a really powerful thing that you can use to rapidly change all of these things and your sense of the ego, because the ego thrives on its own survival, right? And that's kind of why, or the big judge, why it does what it does, because in doing that and trying to build itself up more, it's facilitating its survival or its sense of survival. And the more you don't feed it or don't acknowledge it, the more it's kind of going to disintegrate, disappear, decrease, shrink, all of these things. So the initiation of death, I think, could be through ego dissolution, which can occur through, like, enlightenment. I think it can occur through psychedelics as well. Not saying I recommend that. Disclaimer, don't do that. Talk to your doctor. But in this case, basically, he just says, like, try and recognize that you're going to die one day and keep that in mind, I guess, with your actions, right? And a lot of the time that can be really powerful. Like, I think that's a theme we hear quite a bit, right? If you're fighting with someone, it's like, imagine you lost them, or this is the last time you're going to see them, or you died or passed or anything like that, and it can really put our perspective in check very rapidly. All of a sudden we're like, oh shit, okay, yeah, they left the toaster out, is that really worth, like, ripping them apart the last time I'm ever going to see them? Like, is that how I want to close the book on this relationship? Like, the toaster should be in the cupboard or something? Like, so that's a very useful and quick way to kill the parasite and at least weaken it significantly. So that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Try and think of ways where you can recognize the big judge, the victim, and the agreements, or the big book of law. Try and recognize where you can see these things playing out in your life and opportunities that arise for you to try and tackle it. Maybe cut a couple heads off, or prevent yourself from feeding it, or just realize the bigger picture of, does this really matter? Like, one day none of this is going to be here. Is this how I want to leave it? So that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can leave them down below. Any ideas for upcoming videos as well, always appreciated. And as always, thank you guys for stopping by. Have a great day.